When it comes to marketing campaigns, is all frequency created equal? If you remind your audience once a week to purchase from you, is that as effective as hitting them with the same message several times a day or week as they consume media across various platforms? Well, the answers to those questions are likely to surprise you because we're getting ready to talk about the power of frequency and how you can make your own advertising work better with my guest. And she's going to tell us because she is the Chief Research Officer at NC Solutions, a research powerhouse that has been conducting research, including some of the most comprehensive studies in the history of the advertising industry, which we're going to talk about today. She is responsible for the overall research function, NCS, where she shapes the methodologies that keep the firm on the leading edge of marketing and advertising performance analytics. She has a long and impressive history with deep involvement in single source methodologies and a professional background that includes working for recognized names. We're talking ABC Television, Procter & Gamble, as well as her own company, Media Trust. She's chaired many organizations, earned numerous industry awards, and has the most amazing background I have seen in my series. Leslie Wood, welcome to The Groove.
Thank you so much, Peggy. So happy to be here. It's exciting.
It's great to have you because you are really a pioneer and an innovator in advertising analytics. And I was looking at it like saying, oh, this is really great data. But no, your backstory could be a show in itself. You started some 30 years ago when this really wasn't an easy career to build, particularly as a woman, anybody. Let's start there. What was the spark that lit this fire for you, Leslie?
So I never was sure whether I should be an artist or a mathematician. In high school, got accepted to the top art school as well as the top math school. Decided to go with math because I thought I'd always do art, but if you could get behind pretty quickly in math. In college, I took anthropology and mythology. And a few weeks before I graduated, I changed my major because I had enough credits to be a math major with a minor in statistics and computer science. I had to put myself through school. And I told them that this temp agency that I couldn't type, but I was really good with numbers. And they put me in a research department for a magazine. And I put me through college and just totally enjoyed the problem solving piece of it, the creative numbers, the investigative power. So yeah, the rest is sort of history.
Well, I think we are the beneficiaries of that because it has kept you committed to research and understanding how advertising works. That's a passion and a pursuit. It's also the result and the focus of your studies, including one of the most ambitious in the history of the industry. What has kept you so committed to your research?
I just think that it's fascinating. Early on, single source data was so exciting to me. And so single source is when you have purchase and exposure from the same group of households or people or, where you know what they saw or heard or viewed and then what they bought. And it just showed such potential. And that data kept dying. The computers were very slow. The data was very big. It was really hard to do work there. But it would come up every 5-10 years. There'd be another data set. So I've sought each one. When they've come out, I've raised my hand and said, this is something I want to investigate. And I just see it as when you have an incredible data set and the ability to go explore that data set and see if it can answer questions that you don't know the answer to. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, I have this idea, but to really let the data tell you what's going on is phenomenal. I love solving problems. I love doing puzzles. And this data is an incredible puzzle.
500 marketing studies, actually, another 863 brand campaign studies. All of this together, you used that to distill 5 key drivers of ad effectiveness. What are they? What's the most important factor in driving sales? What did you find out?
So the report, The Five Keys, was phenomenal. It was a wonderful project funded by CBS. And the first thing that was absolutely clear was the creative drives a huge portion. And we've always known that if your creative didn't work, nothing else really can make up for it. But to be able to actually look at data and say, this is the contribution that creative is making. So the biggest contribution comes from creative. There's also a piece that comes from the brand itself. So, if you're a brand where you're a diapers brand and you're going to cost quite a bit every week, getting somebody to buy that brand is very likely to drive a lot of sales, dollar sales. If you're a condiment that's, I use Tabasco often, it's $3 a bottle, and maybe you buy one a year or two. Like, go and advertise a lot. You're going to get $3 more from somebody. It's very different than getting $25 a week from somebody else, right?
Mm.
So the brand plays a big role in what's possible. So the brand has to be big enough. It has to have enough sales so that advertising on a national basis or a large basis will actually make a difference, right? So the brand also contributes. We've seen that fluctuate between 15 and 20%, and creative still is about 50% of the effect. So then you've got now, somewhere between 60 and 75% taken up by other things. The rest is really media, right? And so the three or four things that media really drives are reach, targeting, and recency. There's a little bit of context in there as well. And targeting, interestingly, really has changed over the years. So 5 years ago, we saw that if you targeted non-brand buyers to go get new buyers, you want new people to come in. If you targeted them, you probably did very poorly. And that's because the creative was mostly written for people who love the brand. So you go out with a message that's for people who love the brand to people who don't love the brand, and that's not a message they bought. They've already heard it somewhere else. It never prompted them to buy it. Why would it prompt them to do it now? Like, you have to give them something new or unique or a new purpose or a new use case for the item, right? And that's changed. So the drive to get new buyers has really, in the last 5 years, turned it so that you can do a good job with new buyers, but you have to have specific creative that's designed for that. And for big brands, the results you get if you target existing buyers is 3 times as high as if you don't target. And if you target new buyers, it's twice as high as if you don't target. So why is the twice versus 3? It's much easier to get, advertising is much easier to get somebody who already is interested in the brand to buy it again, or to buy more, or to use more, or to increase that connection to the consumer, right? To connect that consumer more tightly to the brand. Getting somebody to actually buy is hard work, but definitely can do it, and targeting really helps. So you need to reach the consumers, you need to target them, but you want to reach them in a recent, close to when they purchase. It does look like there are brands where seeing an ad 2 or 3 times does improve the likelihood that that creative will work, but it's diminishing returns. So the first exposure is the most powerful, and then there's diminishing returns with additional frequency on average, across many consumers. But you're paying the same price for each one of those exposures. And it's far more important to get an exposure in every week than it is to get 2 in 1 week and none the next. And what we looked at was spread it out. What you really need is consumers to see your ad on a regular basis before they go to the store, A month later, they're not going to remember. 2 months later, they're not going to remember. So delivering that message on a regular basis is the key. And we saw tremendously higher return on ad spends for campaigns that were delivered one a week versus the same reach and frequency delivered in bursts at the beginning or all at the end. If you have a highly seasonal brand, then you should vary it. Make sure that you're delivering your message right before those upticks, right? You want to follow where your sales are so that you're delivering messages in a recent in close proximity to purchase. So there's the trick.
There's a lot to digest there. I want to come back to something because you said, a burst doesn't really work. Now that comes from what I'm always looking at, mobile and digital. People talk about burst campaigns. And I think maybe that's something that spilled over here was the idea if I do a burst campaign and sort of overwhelm and I'm just loud and I buy up all the media all the time, that's going to be effective. But you found out something very, very different.
Yes. So if you do a burst, a mix model will be able to measure that and you will see an uptick. And it's like, wow, it worked, right? But for the bang for your buck on that, anybody that receives more than one message a week, two messages a week, you need creative that's going to work. Like your creative has to have an impact. But spend your money on having better creative instead of taking poor creative and pounding it into somebody's head. If your creative won't capture the imagination or the attention of a consumer, you're wasting your money. You should work towards having the better creative, work towards creative that actually will work. Of course, you use the best that you have, right? So test, know how well your creative is doing and use the best creative that you've got. But then you want to be exposing people in close proximity. We're in different seasons, right? And the key is I think people shop throughout the season, right? But it's way more important to deliver the message well targeted to the people who are likely to respond to the message and to do it on a frequent basis, but not a pounding the message into their head. That is wasting your impressions.
So let's stay with the data for a moment, Leslie, because your study
Yeah.
separates frequency into two types. You have recency and iterative. What do you mean here by iterative, and why is it important or valuable for the industry to look at them separately?
Let's take a week. The first exposure in that week is a recency exposure. It's boom, I've reached them that week. All the additional exposures in that week are called iterative. They're the pounding, they're the repeat, right? When we get to the new week, we say, how many did you reach? And the key to this is you can look at your weekly unique reach and add it all up, and you get your recency frequency. And if you take all your iterative frequency and add it up, that gives you your iterative frequency. And you can see what percent of my impressions were delivered once a week and what percent were this extra pounding. And when we separate them, we can see that the campaigns with high levels of once a week do far better. When you look at return on ad spend, much, much higher, like vast multiples higher for once a week, delivering a fresh reach every week. So the iterative is the extra piece, the beyond the first exposure, what's the rest, the repeat frequency that happened within that week.
How do you look at the channels? Is this a channel mix of, for example, audio marketing? I'm hearing a lot about it. There's a lot of real mileage left in that channel. What are the other channels here? What is the mix?
I think human beings all have different ways that they learn They have different ways that they respond, different channels that work for them. So for you, it might be visual. For me, it might be hearing, might be taste for somebody else, right? Like there's all the different ways that we learn. The more varied your message can be across the different ways that messages are delivered, I think the more likely you are to reach all consumers, right? However you do it, make sure you include the brand. You need to have the name of the brand at the beginning and definitely at the end so that once you've gotten somebody's attention, they actually know what you're selling them. Like, don't pretend. You really have to tell people what you're selling. It's an essential piece. You got to have the brand in there. And if it's visual, include pictures, the words, the pictures, the sound, the name, audio. They're all really important. We've seen them that consistently across time.
I mean, there's so much in your research to be blown away by, and so much that really is a departure from what you're hearing. You're talking about diminishing returns. Frequency can have diminishing returns. And then we have a time of advertising now where it's on social, it's on all the channels, you name them, and then some, where the belief is the more often I see someone in TikTok, the more often I see a story in Snapchat or Instagram, that's going to have an impact. So what have the brands you have worked with so far for this study, and there's 68 consumer packaged good brands, what have they said about this? Has it changed their advertising strategy? Has it changed our view of how important social media is in this constant repeat?
You're always working with a background of clutter. You're always trying to break through. You're always, and the more people are on social media, the more cluttered their environment is. You may need higher frequency, but if you have unlimited budgets, sure, put in that frequency. But with a constrained budget, you may have gotten your message to break through, but they may not be buying your product for another several weeks, and then it's gone. There's all that clutter filled up their brain with a whole lot of other thoughts, and it's moved on. We put time and attention into the brands we choose as consumers, but probably less than the brand manager thinks we do. You know, there's some brands that people absolutely love, but a lot of brands, it's just, I'm shopping, I'm filling my grocery cart, you know, one of these is going to be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, they're trade-offs, right?
And particularly now when we're talking about ramping up to the holidays and holiday shopping period, it's not over when the holiday has come and gone. It actually extends well into January when we're thinking about all the things we have to buy and do to start a new year on the right foot, and spills over a little bit longer. So we have a much longer period. That's the good news. What are you saying to marketers? What would you say to marketers ramping up for this longer holiday period?
Have the best creative you can possibly get. Put your best foot forward. Make your brand shine, right? That's first. Then I would say work to reach likely buyers, likely consumers to the largest extent possible, and try and reach them once a week, not more often, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, your budget will decide how much reach can you buy, and your budget will decide how many weeks, but much better to spread it out, and much better to spread it out across more consumers and spread it out across more weeks than delivering a tight punch to a small group of people.
That also reminds me just a bit of overall what we've always heard about brand recognition, not necessarily acting on that, so not the purchase, but you have to see it 20 times or hear it 20 times. I mean, it fits with that it has to be over time. It's not 20 times in a specific tight period of time. It is over time. And that's what this seems to be building upon. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think You also, you may think you're delivering that message over and over and over again in a short period of time, but most people will change the channel, swipe right, swipe up, move on when they get to something that they've seen too often. Yes, it's a reminder ad, but it's not as valuable as the first time they really saw it. You're delivering a very small tweak to your campaign rather than actually delivering the full value of an exposure.
This is just one piece of research, Leslie. I'm sure we're going to be talking about more and more because now that I've
Oh,
started
yes.
looking at this, there is so much there. But your company, rather, NC Solutions, has
Yes,
applied for a patent on this methodology, but you're also offering it for free licensing. How's it coming along?
we
How's it
are.
gaining traction, particularly with the smaller companies that would really benefit?
We've had a number of our publishers have signed on. They're changing their methodology. There were several big publishers whose advertising was their goal was a one frequency for the campaign, and they've moved to once a week. We've seen several advertisers ask their other providers to be able to give them an estimate of how much their actual reach is, weekly reach or recency reach versus iterative. And really, what we see is in that paper we looked at these 68 brands. We looked at what percent, and it was almost a straight line between 3% all the way up to 90%. This is something that isn't being measured. It's not being monitored. So it's clear that if you knew what percent it was, you would go towards more weekly reach. So having those numbers, it's great to be able to see.
And it also keeps you true to your mission because from day one, Leslie, it's been about understanding how does advertising work, how to make it work better.
Absolutely.
What's next for you?
So we are updating the five keys.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my whole year is going to be. That's a big project. Um, we uh, we already have 750 campaigns for this group.
Hmm.
We will be adding to it over the course of the year. So who knows? Could be it's based, they're real studies. So whatever number we actually do, we will be adding to that. And we're looking at the insights that we can get, that we can see from this. So we know against our loyalty ladder, we know how much lift there was. We know how many incremental sales, what the return on ad spend was. We know top line, also 13 cells. We know about the brand, all the loyalty metrics for the brand. And we know how well each of the pieces of creative did and how well they did and how much of their reach and frequency was recency versus iterative. So we have all these components and we're looking at how important are they? What part do they play in driving sales? We've got 5 chapters in this book. We've divided it up into chapters, and each chapter will be delivering one of the pieces that dives deep into each of these elements and look at how they vary across different media and different tactics and different types of campaigns. So that's this coming year. Plus, there's we're responsible for innovation at NCS, and there's some very exciting things the team is innovating.
That's what I was going to say, Leslie. It sounds like an encore to me. That's what it all adds up to. It adds up to an ongoing conversation. So glad to have not just found your research, but have the opportunity also to hear you interpret it. Thanks so much for sharing, Leslie.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for reaching out. It's been wonderful working with you, Peggy.
Great segue, by the way, Leslie, because I know that our audience, just like myself, they'll want to understand this. Keep up, do whatever it takes. Let me understand what's the best way to either stay up to date with what you're doing or NC Solutions, or what's the best links here?
There's a link called, it's for all the thought leadership, and it is, if you look at info.ncSolutions.com/how-advertising-works. And it has all of the thought leadership work that we've been doing.
So thanks again, Leslie. And of course, for everyone else, knowledge is for sharing. Leslie proves it. So spread the word, tell your tribe, like the show, share it, send it over to your colleagues, subscribe to the channel. All of the above would be amazing for the show, myself, my guests. Until then, this is Peggy Ann Saltz signing off for The Groove.